The Patriots named Jerod Mayo their new head coach. Obviously, this was something that was sort of being reported. They had put it contractually. We talked about that a bit last week. It was part of his contract that he was going to be the heir apparent. And even though, Mike Vrabel or Jim Harbaugh, other big names were out there in the landscape, they did not pivot. They stayed the course. They stuck with the game plan. And Jerod Mayo is now going to be the head coach of the New England Patriots.
Yeah, so this one is interesting when you talked about how, the messaging, the optics from New England sort of is, hey, Bill was the problem. I know it's not that clean and concise, but I find it fascinating, not just giving the job to Jerod Mayo, who I think has earned it and is obviously not Bill Belichick. He's made that clear, but at the front office structure, they still might just stick with the same approach they've had. And Kraft did mention we'll look outside the building, we'll maybe do things differently. But when I listened to him, it didn't sound like that was like an urgent thing they were going to work on or a massive desire to make meaningful change. And I don't know. I just that kind of stuck out to me. Like, oh, you also think that Mayo could be better in the personnel side, and I know all their coaches, like Flores was a personnel guy before he was a coach. Even like they always love cross training everyone, so I'm sure Mayo falls in that bucket as well, and maybe he does. And obviously, there's randomness and variance in drafting too. If they just followed the consensus board and stopped trying to, take the 114th ranked player at left guard in the first round, like maybe they'd be fine. But yeah, that part stuck out to me big time. Last piece, we found out this morning or late last night, Bill O'Brien going to Ohio State to be the OC. So got to replace that side of the ball. Weird. We don't have to get into that. We don't cover college, but that was a strange move, I thought. But anyway,
it's interesting. You said that Jerod Mayo had earned it, and yet one of the things that a lot of people are saying is that, well, this is a guy that's never been a coordinator, never called plays. So how do those two things square? Like, what is Mayo's resume that makes him the heir apparent? Because they've sort of gone this way for a while. There's been this feeling in the building that Mayo is a future head coach in waiting, and he's the guy that eventually is going to take over from Bill Belichick. And maybe the timeline is different than they expected it to be, but they've stuck with that course. They've predetermined this is the guy, and he's the one that's assumed the mantle of that job.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing for me is, his position group, can make an argument that the linebackers, the inside linebackers particularly, he's gotten more value or untapped the talent there more than maybe any other position coach across the league recently, just with all the guys they've either drafted in late rounds or brought in that were not playing well or not playing period in other buildings. They come in New England and put up really good numbers or just fit in the system what they're trying to accomplish. So there's that element, the leadership element and all that. And I think what ties in there is I imagine he will be a CEO type head coach. Maybe I think it'd be kind of interesting if the Belichick kids follow Bill or if they try to kind of plant their flag and do their own thing, because obviously Belichick's not going to be around for that much longer. And since Steve took over, the defense is number one in the NFL in EPA per play allowed. Like, they've been good, and Bill hasn't been calling plays for a while. So I think that's where it comes from. Is he obviously has a massive leadership role. He obviously can coach the fundamentals and all that, which we always hear about how Belichick would walk around the field and be teaching technique and all those things. And then I know we're obsessed with play calling. And of course, the best coaches, the Andy Reids of the world, are also doing that, and it separates them. But I don't think that's a big push in New England. He might not even be calling the defense. That might not be their main concern for a head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a weird position. Somebody pointed out, like, recently, the number of coaches, I think that before last week, in the division, the wild card round of the playoffs, like, here are the number of guys that were never offense or defensive coordinators. It's been pretty successful. Like, there's a good group of them, because being a head coach is not just being an X's and O's coach, it's doing 58 other things as well, right? So you can be really good at a bunch of other things, even if you're not great at the X's and O's part of it, and we don't know that he isn't. He just hasn't had that coordinator responsibility or that play calling responsibility. I also think if you're not going to be one of those guys, like if you're not a Kyle Shanahan where you control the offense and therefore it doesn't matter if somebody poaches an endless sequence of your coordinators, right? If somebody steals McDaniel and Slowick and whoever the next guy is going to be and just keeps taking them, doesn't matter. He's the guy pulling the strings anyway. He just backfills and teaches the next guy up and then he leaves. It's all Shanahan. If you're not going to be that guy, if you are actually going to rely on your coordinators, let's say John Harbaugh, right? where he's not doing it. He was a special teams coordinator. He essentially delegates the offense and defense to coordinators. If you're going to be that guy and you're going to be good, the chances are those guys are going to get poached. So your best skill almost needs to be hiring coaching staff. Like, forget, actually doing the offense. I need to make sure that the first time somebody steals my great offense or defensive coordinator, I can replace him with somebody equally as good.
Yeah, and I think there is honestly a skill to that. There are guys that, first of all, that people want to go work for more. Your network is massive. I think being a former player, like for me, I'm sitting here thinking about Detroit. They're going to lose Ben Johnson. The scuttlebutt in Detroit is they think Tanner Engstrand, who I want to say is the, QB coach, run game, so pass game coordinator maybe, is going to step up and fill that void. And again, we can't assume anyone's going to be a Ben Johnson, but like apparently there's like no concern. They think he's a rising star. He's so like if you have that level, and I say Campbell because the former player, all those coaches on that staff, guys want to go work there. They can, like you said, backfill too. If you're a Shanahan, you lose all these coaches. Oh, now Clint Kubiak is your, pass game coordinator. He was calling plays in 2021. Like, so you always are able to. And then I think the last piece is kind of the cyclical nature of the NFL. Like, not going to happen to Mike McDaniel, but like, I don't know. Let's say Miami falls apart next year and goes 5-12. Like, Mike McDaniel's probably just the OC in San Francisco right again. So it's kind of, it is a skill. It's important. It's necessary for sure. Because at a certain point, you obviously can get in a Patriots type situation, maybe on the offensive side of the ball, or something happens that it just kind of it kills you. But I think you can figure it out for a while.
I do find the Belichick kids angle pretty fascinating. Like, okay, Belichick is getting dumped. I know they got the hug at the press conference, right? So PR wise, optics wise, it's all good. But reading between the lines, it's fairly clear that it's like, Bill, you're the problem and we're getting rid of you, right? That's essentially what happened here. And yet, with Bill Belichick being fairly unceremoniously dumped out of the building, it's like, but Steve, and I don't even remember the name of his other kid that works there. But anyway, Steve and the other Belichick, you guys still have a job. If you would like to stay here on the coaching staff and continue the work of excellent defense, by all means, have at it. Jerod's okay with that. That's a weird situation to be in for everybody, isn't it? I mean, the Kraft saying, yes, we just asked your dad, but we'd like you to stay here. Them being in that position of, well, they just ran our dad out of the building, but the job is here if we want it. And then Bill having to be like, they just kicked me out of the building, and yet I need to root for my kids that are still calling defense. And by the way, might be competing against my kids who still call the defense next year.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I really do wonder if their prioritization is, hey, let's obviously ride this thing out, with our dad, wherever he goes, we'll just go there and coach with him. Or like I said, like, the best way to get to not be viewed as, oh, they're just Belichick's kid. What if, Steve stays and the defense is awesome again next year? Of course, Mayo's part of that. But okay, this guy's been calling plays now. Now he's not even with his dad, and they're still, have a really, really good unit. He probably starts popping up as a head coach candidate in the not so distant future.
Yeah, definitely. It's just awkward as hell for everybody involved.
Yeah. It is.
So, it's so strange to me that I guess you can't, you can't like add insult to injury and be like, not only are we running you out of the building, but we're going to run your kids out as well. In fact, anybody with the name Belichick is no longer welcome in this building. Get out now. I guess you can't do that. So the alternative is...
They are individuals at the end of the day. They have to be viewed as such, but I get it for sure.
Yeah, so the alternative is everyone just has to play nice in this really awkward situation.
I think if any team fired someone and then anyone related to him also had to leave, I think most NFL buildings would run out of employees because it's all just, if you're a cousin or an uncle or whatever. So I mean, that's tough too. You can't really do that. Otherwise, the building would be, crickets going on in the building.
It's all just one giant nepotism party in the NFL. That's what it is.